In the last video, we ended up receiving the home page as a response once we successfully logged in. But why is that? Actually, we were already logged in. I'm sorry about that. And there's actually no problem. Our system works as expected. So just to make sure that we're always logged out, in my web.php, I set up this helpful method or this helpful route, which simply logs out any authenticated users when we visit it. Okay, so before we actually test out our login again, I'm going to log out in case I was logged in, and then I'm going to visit the home page and I'm going to open my login modal, paste in that email address, type in secret for our user, and then click login. And sure enough, we have this login successful response that is coming from our controller. So the next step is actually determining what we want to return to our user once he successfully logs in. Let's head over to our Laravel part of the application, which is in our login controller. And once we are authenticated, what do I want to do? First of all, I'm going to be using our session to flash. So when the page actually loads, we're going to check if there's any notifications in the session, and we're going to display it using a view component or maybe any notification service that we want to use. So I'm going to session flash, and it's going to be a success message. And this is simply going to say successfully logged in, right? So we flash to the session and we return login successfully. Now, this is actually where we have to decide what sort of responses we want to give back to our front end, right? Because we need to actually have a standard, because there are a lot of standards out there to actually return responses to our front end. Okay, so when I'm actually building APIs, I have a helpful method which I call maybe this send success response, and this method is always in my controller.php so that it's available to all of my controllers. And the method actually takes in the status code and the data that I need to pass to the front end and formats it in a particular response format and sends it as a response. Now, in this case, we're communicating with our Laravel application directly, so I think we could actually take care of responses directly in the methods, right? So we can just say return response JSON. And another thing is you can actually decide to use Laravel's responsible interface to format your responses. But in this case, we just need to confirm to Vue.js that the user is logged in, right? So I'm just going to say status of OK. So Vue.js, once it sees a status of OK, it knows this user was successfully logged in. Now, back into our Vue component, if the response was successful, we can actually check for the status code right here. We can actually check for the data to see if the status code was okay. But if everything was successful, meaning we successfully logged our user in, we'll just refresh the current page. Now, we can simply use JavaScript's default API by saying location.reload, and it will take care of that. Now, what's the advantage of doing this? In our app.blade.php, now we can actually make sure that our template is rendered in the correct way. So right down at the bottom where we have this login, we can actually wrap this in an if statement and say if auth check else and if. So if the user is not authenticated, would have that link. But then if the user is already authenticated, why don't we grab his name? So we're just going to say auth user name. Okay, so we can just say hey auth user name. Okay, so once our request to the server is successful and Vue.js receives a successful response, it's simply going to reload the current page. And once it reloads that page, sure enough, our template is going to re-render and we should see the user's name and we should not see the login button, right? Another thing we want to actually do is make sure that this is not mounted if we are authenticated. Okay, so no need to have extra HTML templates. So if auth check, and actually we want the not, right? So if it's not auth check and if, we're simply gonna actually mount that component. Now Laravel provides us with some custom Blade directives that we're actually gonna be switching out when we're refactoring, but for now let's go ahead and just see this work. A quick call to our logout endpoint. So we make sure we actually logged out, visit our home page, and let's try to log in. I'll paste in that email, type in the password, click on login, and automatically our page is refreshed. And here we have hey Arno Pro Sa Co whatever, and that is actually the user we have here. So our login by Ajax is successfully working. But what about validation checks or actually errors that we receive from our server? Let's take care of that in the next video.